a roll call. Chair Matthews.
Here.
Board Member Matthews. Board Member Jones is absent. Castellano is here. Randy Katie.
Here.
And Steve Madrone is absent. And Frank Wilson. Great. Good to see you all.
Steve, can you hear me?
Oh, sorry. Hi.
Yeah, I'm in Zoom, so I can't vote unless I do it. So if there's a need for a quorum, I'll do a just cause. Otherwise, I'll just listen, participate, but not vote, if that's okay, Madam Chair.
So either way, the just cause, what?
Just for clarification, so should I mark him as present?
I think you should go ahead and do the just cause unless he would prefer not to use his one of two just causes for the year. Just cause are the various circumstances, and then all of your votes need to be taken through roll call because he'll be attending. But again, it's his choice. There is a quorum now without.
Okay.
General Counsel Diamond, there's also no action items. It is receive and just provide direction as appropriate. So there's no action items on the agenda.
Okay, that's good to know. You don't have to worry about taking quorum, but if he wants to participate in the discussion.
Right. Director Madrone, you want to participate in the discussion?
Well, I'd rather not use my just cause on this one night if there's already a quorum.
Okay,
Can
great.
you participate as a public?
Yeah, I can listen.
Why not?
Okay. All right, so board members, Madrone and Jones absent from formal participation. And with that, we'll move on to the consent calendar. All matters listed on the consent calendar are considered to be routine by the HWMA board and will be enacted upon by one motion unless a specific request for review is made by a board member or member of the public. The consent calendar will not be read. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless pulled for discussion.
I move to approve the minutes from April 13th, 2023.
I second.
Okay. Director Matthews making the motion and Director Katie seconding it. Any discussion on the consent calendar? Or okay, we'll go ahead and call the vote. Do a roll call vote. Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion passes unanimously. Directors Madrone and Jones absent. We'll move on to item number 3, oral and written communications. This time is provided for people to address the board or to submit written communications concerning matters not on this agenda. Board members may respond to statements, but any request that requires board action will be referred to staff for review. Reasonable time limits may be imposed on both the total amount of time allocated for this item and on the time permitted to each individual speaker. Such time allotment or portion thereof shall not be transferred to other speakers. Are there any members of the public who wish to make comment at this time in chambers?
Maybe next time.
Okay. Seeing none, are there any members of the public on Zoom that wish to make comment? Okay. Seeing none, we will go ahead and close oral and written communications and move on to item number 4, receive and provide direction on draft fiscal year 2023-2024 budget. Director Heckman, hand it over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the projected timeline for the 2023-2024 budget development. HWMA board will receive the draft budget this evening. Staff will then present the draft budget and receive changes tonight to the Executive Advisory Committee on May 4th. At the board's regularly scheduled meeting on May 11th, the final budget will be presented and adopted. The following Monday, May 15th, staff will circulate adopted resolution and Schedule A, waste management fees to member agencies and franchise holders. And finally, on July 1st of 2023, the fiscal year will. The The key topics we will touch on tonight are budget assumptions, including projected revenues and expenditures, waste management fee structure and adjustments, reserves, personnel compensation, the capital improvement plan and proposed projects, and other board direction. Revenue assumptions are based on a projected 80,000 tons of solid waste. The Hawthorne Street Transfer Station will receive 65,000 tons across self-haul and franchise customers. Satellite facilities are projected 10,000 tons and out-of-area self-haul at 5,000. It should be noted that this last year, satellite facilities received in excess of the amount projected here. Staff will reanalyze the current projection model if these tons continue to trend upward. Additionally, grant projects will only utilize awarded funds otherwise approved by the board. One of the largest factors in the proposed increase to fees is the backhaul projections for this coming year. Historically, HWMA and satellite facilities have benefited from receiving 60 to 70% backhauls for their materials sent to Dry Creek landfill. Since early 2023, this rate has dropped precipitously to around 20%. This is directly related to the decrease in soil and hog fuel needs in Humboldt County. HWMA staff met with Dry Creek and Bettendorf staff to discuss the upcoming year. Through these conversations, staff is recommending using a 15% backhaul projection and updating the board and potentially rates should we return to historical averages. Staff has made every effort to make comparisons from this fiscal year to the prior year, as like for like as possible. But with several changes to accounting softwares mid-year, which includes line items and reclassifications of certain allocations, several items will not be a one-to-one comparison. Two examples of these are the countywide program fees and base fee revenue. Additionally, the solid waste tip fee revenue is another example. In years past, the countywide program fees and HWMA base fees have been included in the tipping fee revenue and then backed out or expensed out to their correct divisions. Staff believes this artificially inflates the gross revenue and makes understanding the revenue flow of the authority more difficult. The projected revenues have been separated to show a better representation of authority revenue. Other revenues include HHW revenue generated from salvage materials sold, grant funding, and rental income. One area of note is timber revenue. In the past, these revenues have been projected and placed here. With the current market fluctuations for wood and the margin for error being larger than staff is comfortable with, no timber revenue has been projected for this year. Staff recommends in the future, when timber harvests do happen, those revenues either be allocated to the capital improvement fund or be brought before the board and other recommendations made at that time. As mentioned earlier, one of the largest increases in cost will be realized in the solid waste transportation and disposal line due to changes in the projected backhauls. The total projected net income to the authority for fiscal year 23-24 is $5.25. The solid waste portion of the waste management fee is made up of three main components. The countywide program fee, which houses pass-throughs and other county-related programs. Examples are the current HHW facility, which is fully funded by this household hazardous waste fee that's seen here. The Cummings Road landfill pleasant revenue has also been renamed from the Cummings Road maintenance to more accurately reflect the purpose for which these fees are collected. The HWMA base fee is responsible for funding all other programs or divisions at the authority. Over the last several years, there's been a slow transition to reduce the amount of subsidies the solid waste division gives to other divisions. This will also make fees accurately reflect the true costs of these divisions. For fiscal year 23-24, these fees will now fully fund the individual divisions and programs. The facility fee houses the cost for transportation and disposal of solid waste to Dry Creek landfill. The direct operational costs of handling that waste, indirect expenses, and necessary reserve funding requirements. Staff has made several changes to the facility fee structure in prior Staff has made several changes to the facility fee structure for this fiscal year. In prior years, transportation disposal and operating costs were housed in one line item. Staff has separated these to give better clarity to both expenses. Staff has also renamed what was called the capital expenditures to the reserve funding, again, to better clarify the funding source. Staff is recommending several increases to the current waste management fees. Cell phone rates are recommended to be increased to $182.17. This represents an increase of $22.56 per ton, or just under a 14% increase. Franchise rates are recommended to be increased to $169.41, which is an increase of $33.95 per ton, or a 25% increase. A new methodology for calculating the franchise rate was developed by staff this year. In prior years, franchise rates have been set based off the proposed self-haul rate and reduced to incentivize residents to participate in the expansion of curbside collected programs. Staff believe while this may have been appropriate at the time, it may not currently accurately reflect costs associated with handling those wastes. Because of this, staff developed the direct operating cost portion of the facility fee for fiscal year 23-24. Analysis were done to daily operations and an allocation percentage was developed for directing operating costs and applied to individual waste streams. This resulted in a reduced cost per ton for franchise waste related to direct operating costs. Staff will continue to assess the viability of the allocation and refine for future budgets as needed. Satellite fees in prior years were blended together and applied evenly to the two sites. Staff has developed individual rates for each location that better reflect the actual cost for our satellite sites. Recology Eel River is recommended to be increased to $134.44, which is an increase of $30.94 per ton, or a 30% increase. Humboldt sanitation rate is recommended to be increased to $124.76, which is an increase of $21.54 per ton, or a 20% increase. Recyclable materials processing fee. This fee is subject to change pending the final waste management fees. Staff recommends no longer offsetting costs related to the residual disposal in the recycling and processing contract. The original intent of the residual credit was for the authority to fully offset costs of residual disposal by our member agencies at the Hawthorne Street Transfer Station. As it was anticipated when we entered into the agreement, residual rates would always remain well under that 15% threshold. Unfortunately, this is no longer the case, and residuals are routinely above 25% in relation to this contract. This would represent a savings to the authority of approximately $280,000 annually. If the board would like to continue to offset these costs for member agencies, staff would recommend covering the entire disposal cost of residuals and no longer tying what we cover to an outdated number. This is a breakdown of the waste management fees and can be found on page 36 of the draft budget. For board members, if you flip to the blue tab in your packet, it can be seen there. So as previously noted, under facility fees, the transportation and disposal and direct operating costs have been made into separate lines. This is where you will see the reduced direct operating costs related to franchise wastes. As you can see, there are increases across the board outside of the countywide program fee, which will see a reduction of $3.23 per ton. This reduction can be attributed to the Cummings Road landfill pledge of revenue line, and now currently represents costs associated solely with that activity. It no longer has a blended rate that includes Cummings Road landfill operational costs. The authority currently maintains 4 distinct reserve funds. Operating reserves are to ensure available funds for unseen capital needs, economic uncertainties, and cash flow requirements as needed. Based on the target of 15% of operational expenses, the target reserve requires an additional increase of $136,327.68. The capital improvement reserve is utilized for future planned expenses related to capital projects as approved by the board. The reserve was fully funded last year in the amount of $900,000, and no projects were executed in this last fiscal year. In November of 2022, the board earmarked $650,000 of those funds to be used for potential site improvements for the upcoming organics processing facility. This leaves the current funded level at $250,000. Staff recommends leaving those funds earmarked until the results of the organics grant application is known in October of this year. An additional $291,045 $291,045 is needed to fully fund the reserve for all projects in this upcoming year. The rate stabilization reserve is used to offset unexpected costs related to contract services. Approximately $220,000 was used this fiscal year to offset the dramatic change in backhaul opportunities and related costs. The total authority reserves for this year are $3,099,835. The budget as presented includes a cost of living adjustment for all employees of 6.5%. HWMA undertook a salary survey in fiscal year 2019-2020, which was a first for the authority. Since then, COLAs have been recommended based on little more than either historical precedents or a best estimate in order to keep authorities' wages competitive. What you see before you is an attempt to tie this recommendation to tangible data, but staff is open to other methodologies should the board direct so. The chart below shows the annual and cumulative inflation of the consumer price index for all urban consumers, and it has increased 15% since January of 2021. During that time, the authority has granted a 5% COLA. This represents an 8% gap if no COLA is approved for this year. Staff recommends closing this gap over the next 2 years while developing a schedule for contracting with an outside agency to perform regular salary survey work. The HWMA org chart, as presented, recommends unfreezing the analyst position that has remained frozen since 2019 and bring back an updated job description for that position to the board in May. The unfrozen analyst position will be utilized to renew the authority education and outreach materials, manage the authority's website, and begin to give HWMA a social media presence that we currently lack. Additionally, staff recommends keeping the 2 vacant MDT positions frozen for this fiscal year and reassess the need for these positions once the organics processing facility operations are better understood. The capital improvement plan has undergone a complete overhaul and now includes project descriptions, funding timelines, and cleanup to distinctly outline projects that have been approved in previous years. These projects will be listed as seen here and updated annually with the approval of the budget. Staff has also included sections for projects that either have been approved or proposed for removal, along with completed projects that should cycle out of the plan. We believe this will better outline plan activity and how projects flow throughout the capital improvement plan. One of the key aspects of the CIP is future planning and identifying when projects are needed along with the funding timelines for those projects. Staff has overhauled the funding timeline for all current projects on the CIP and has proposed timelines for new projects. This will ensure funding is being set aside for these future projects and develop longer funding windows to mitigate yearly impacts to this fund. The CIP will now be an integral part of the annual budget and should be updated as such. There are 3 specific items staff would like the board to provide direction on, in addition to other direction as appropriate. First is the illegal disposal and cleanup fund. As noted earlier, the fund has been fully utilized for the 2 previous fiscal years, along with funds already being fully expended this year. Member agency staff has expressed a desire for expanded use of these funds, and staff recommends increasing the funding level for this year. In addition to the increased funding level, staff would like to work with member agencies to better define and potentially broaden what type of cleanups and projects these funds can be used for. Staff will request the Executive Advisory Committee weigh in on this at the draft budget meeting next week and staff will provide a recommendation to the board in May. If the board has any direction here tonight, that will also be included in the conversation.
Question, what is MSW? Is that municipal?
Municipal solid waste,
Okay,
sorry.
that's what I thought. I just wanted to confirm.
The next proposed item is an addition to the countywide program fees for edible food recovery. Based off studies from SB 1383, work produced by Edgar and Associates and Abound, a lack of in-county capacity and infrastructure has been identified in Humboldt County. The County of Humboldt is in the midst of a request for proposal for edible food recovery program manager. The successful proposer will make recommendations on infrastructure needs for the edible food recovery program and ecosystem in Humboldt County. Staff proposes initial funding of $30,000 that will be passed to the County of Humboldt to offset costs related to this recommended infrastructure purchase. In addition to providing potential funding for much needed infrastructure, this community benefit will grant HWMA additional bonus points in its organic grant proposal that is due next week. Finally, staff would like input on the cost of living methodology discussed earlier this evening. I'd be happy to answer any questions and open it up for discussion.
That's fun. So $5, huh? $5, that's what, once the budget's balanced, that's what we're positive?
I mean, yeah, it's $5.25. I could have tweaked an expense to match it to zero, but that's not particularly my style of doing things.
What would the numbers look like if we just increased the tip fees across the board to just 25% for everything? I mean,
I don't know.
is that a reasonable suggestion? I feel like how long has it been since we've raised fees? Like 7 years here?
So last year we raised it 5%. Prior to that, I believe it was 2016 that the fees were the same. A flat across the board raise for equally is the kind of the intent staff had of avoiding with developing not only the individual costs to each satellite facility, but the direct operating costs to give. Staff believes that this gives a very true description of what every single cost and waste stream cost at the authority. If
I don't know.
the addition of just a 20% flat fee is almost continuing historically what we've done is either not changing it or arbitrarily adding 5% to the tip fee to try and cover costs.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like even like a couple dollars to each line item would help us, and maybe we could replenish some kind of our reserves with that, or.
So we would have to, the board would have to make allocations to what those excess funds would go to. Obviously, it's something we can take a look at, but they would need to be set aside for a specific purpose.
Okay.
We have reserves now.
That's correct.
I thought that was fully funded a long time ago.
So they
I
were,
mean, you're doing it a little, you've got a different.
yeah, they were originally fully funded when they were originally adopted from the board. They've gone through peaks and valleys over the years. A couple of the items need to be refunded, not completely. Obviously, the operating costs, the undesignated reserve fund fluctuates with our operating costs. It's 15% of that. The rate stabilization fee has not been touched for a very long time. It was utilized to the tune of $220,000 this year because of the change in backhaul projections. That fund is recommended to be replenished and is included in the budget as presented. The capital improvement fund is always fluctuating based on the projects that are in it and the funding windows. And as stated earlier, the capital improvement plan has been completely revamped with new funding windows and funding structures, along with a new proposed funding level.
Can you do me a favor and explain residuals a bit more? I just kind of lost at that.
So residuals means what is considered waste after a processing of a product. So in this case, we're talking about the recycling, the mixed stream recycling that's collected at the curb and that's dropped off at the Hawthorne Street transfer station. Material goes to Recology. They process it, they sort material, they send good material out to sale. Material that cannot be recycled is considered residual, and that will end up being landfill. A lot of the times, this is recyclable material that unfortunately has been contaminated by other materials. A good example of this is like peanut butter jars. Peanut butter jars in themselves are recyclable. If you leave a ton of peanut butter in them, they are no longer recyclable. The other issue with putting material like that into the recycling stream is that not only is that material not recyclable, but if it goes to the sort facility, it gets put on the floor and it gets smeared onto a bunch of office pack. Now that office pack is no longer recyclable. So the dirty material that we place in our can can actually affect and make good, clean material more dirty by doing that. And that is what residual is. It just means after the processing, material that cannot be recycled or sailed for recycling, it goes to the landfill.
So, what happens, and I don't know if this is a stupid question or not, what happens if, like, Fortuna and Trinidad join the JPA? Does that affect our budget?
That would be too broad of a question for me to be able to answer.
Okay.
It is very unlikely. So we will not get a cost reduction based off their added tonnage.
Okay.
Our contract with Dry Creek Landfill and their subcontractor Bettendorf, I don't want to say minimal, but the incidental amount of tons that those two jurisdictions may add would not push us into a new threshold of seeing a cost saving, especially with the situation of backhauls right now. Now, that doesn't mean that other funding would not be paid into the authority by base fees, additional countywide management fees, things like that. So that is a difficult question for me to answer without really analyzing their tonnage, what they would commit, and the costs associated with that.
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead. I'll come back to me.
You can, go ahead, because we can get everyone. Yeah.
Sucking it all in.
Okay, so I guess this one kind of maybe really basic question, from your perspective, does this budget give HWMA enough of a cushion to address any potential, just unknown circumstance that might add costs in the upcoming years?
Do you have a specific example, or so the rate stabilization fund, fully funding that this year, that is specifically used to offset unanticipated costs related to contract services. So that means the recycling processing contract, that means the green waste contracts, that means the transportation and disposal of solid waste. That is what that rate stabilization fund is to do, is to try and get us from point A to point B, which is exactly what it did this year, because of either a miscalculation of backhaul percentage or just a loss of that opportunity in general. Staff is going the opposite direction after having counsel with our contract haulers. 15% is probably on the low end. Hopefully, we see a little bit higher than that. But outside of reserve fundings that are specifically meant for emergencies, this budget does not have any extra money, I guess, is a better way to put it.
Do you think it would make sense to kind of give the capital improvement plan a little more scrutiny in terms of, are there other things that we should be planning for, or will that be something that we would then, like I'm thinking with the composting or whatever, but maybe that would be more of a mid-year budget review, or?
I think, so staff took a long look at completely restructuring the CIP this year. In the coming year, obviously, we plan on taking a look at long-term projects. We have not had the opportunity to do that in quite a while. And so we need to do a better job of long-term planning. And I hope in the coming year that we'll be able to assess some of those needs. Additionally, without knowing how the grant for the organics project is actually going to turn out, and quite frankly, the exact operations and things that we learn when we start doing that activity, it's tough to make recommendations for capital expenditures based off that. But the Hawthorne Street Transfer Station, the Cummings Road landfill, and the household hazardous waste facility, they do have infrastructure needs that are not in this capital improvement plan. But staff needs to take a look at how exactly we are going to fund that and an appropriate funding window so that it doesn't continually greatly impact the tip fee in a yearly basis. If you look at the bottom of the funding windows for the capital improvement plan, you'll notice that we've started to stretch those funding windows out. In prior years, they have been, normally they're 1 to 3 years. And what I want to get away from is trying to fund large projects in 1 to 3 years and expanding that funding window to allow us to lessen the impact on the annual tip fee.
Questions, but I'd like to hear if there are other questions.
The one that concerns me the most, and we talked about it once before, but RCA had a pretty good reserve, and then we turned that, and it's like we're spending all of that, the big portion of that, on redoing the floor and the place for the organic. Is there a way that that'll be recouped? Because it's like this is something that's going to all the entities, not HWMA. And yeah, if I'm making myself clear.
Yeah, so two things. The allocation for the floor was earmarked by this board in November of last year, and that funding actually came out of the capital improvement fund.
That's for the loader.
Yeah, no, that is for the floor. The loader, we went through a lease to free up liquidity so that we could put that money aside. The $650,000, I am recommending that we remain in the capital improvement plan, but earmarked for potential organics projects. So if you want to look at it as if we do not get the grant, a potential safety net of $650,000 for organics projects is there. If we do get the grant, staff will make recommendations to allocate that to different projects in the capital improvement plan. So that $650,000 we still have, and it is earmarked for the organics facility pending the grant application results in October. As far as recouping fees, when we open the organics facility, I should say prior to opening the organics facility next fiscal year, we will need to do a complete overhaul of our waste management fee structure to ensure that not only are we covering costs, but we're recouping capital costs from everybody. So yeah, that I don't have exact answers for you on how we're going to do that because we will need to re-examine the waste management fee structure as a whole.
But we're basing on a grant to recoup that organic.
We are in a position right now where if we get the grant, that's great. If we don't, we have positioned ourselves to where we still have the funding to necessitate some of the projects in the grant. Does that answer my question?
It makes that sense, but it's just what RCA built, HWMA built up, has gone over to be, depending on the grant, going over to the organic feature, which was separate from what HWMA was originally doing.
That is correct.
It's like this is a new section of HWMA is taking on this life. I don't know if I'm making sense.
No, you're making tremendous sense. Obviously, the authority was founded really for two things, and that's to manage municipal solid waste and the Cummings Road landfill. Throughout HWMA's history, we have continued to take on and expand not only our diversion projects, but our programs at the request of our member agencies. The household hazardous waste facility was originally housed under the County of Humboldt. HWMA took that on for the County of Humboldt. Our AB 939 allocations and work originally was housed in member agencies. Some of those member agencies have contracted with HWMA to do those type of things.
Well,
The
what's the AB? I don't know what AB.
It's the Waste Reduction Act.
Okay.
Yeah. The Eureka Recycling Center is a perfect example. We were originally founded to manage solid waste in Cummings Road landfill, but we have expanded well past that at the request of our member agencies, if that answers.
So I know we moved ahead from the original thing to that's about where I came in the game, was they'd gone over to the recycling side, which wasn't, there was some debate at that time about whether or not that was part of the original deal. And then it somehow got straightened out that is now, that was absorbed as another feature of HWMA to do the recycling.
Yeah.
And then we eliminated a certain amount of that recycling when we decided to go to the
Organic.
to the organics. We shut down the whatever it was, refrigerators and something that we no longer do. And so it's like it's a whole revamping of what HWMA's goal going to be, because all the agencies that are a part of it, exclusive of the two that we're trying to recruit, that would be are now taking on this 1385 thing.
Yeah, I would, so one clarification I would make is that HWMA staff has every intention to pursue reopening a Eureka Recycling Center at some point in the future. Obviously, we asked the board to put that on hold until we got the organics facility up and running and under control and budgeted for. But what I would say is that the authority has evolved, so has the waste stream. So the authority has evolved through time to match the evolving waste stream that we manage. When the authority was founded, it was trash in and trash out. I have staff members that's worked here when HWMA took over the Hawthorne Street transfer station. Trash came into the facility, trash went out of the facility. There was no diversion activities, there was no recycling, there was no anything. All of that went into the landfill. As statutory mandates come out, as diversion programs are produced, as recycling has come full circle, the authority has expanded and evolved to include those waste management services under its umbrella. If we did not do that, very soon in the future, there could be a potential where we are collecting less and less trash, and more material is being diverted out of our waste stream and out of our scope. Does that answer some of that?
That part kind of brings in a new thing to me, but I see what you're saying on the first part about by acquiring more responsibilities to take care of more issues. And we're reflecting all that through the tipping fees and the franchise fees, I guess.
Yeah, the majority of our programs are funded by the HWMA base fees. The household hazardous waste facility is funded by the countywide program fees. Certain other programs are funded by the countywide program fees. But yes, as of right now, all of our funding is really funded outside of grant opportunities and other certain cash flows, sale of recyclable materials, salvage materials. All of that is burdened on the tip fee. That is correct. That is why when we open the organics facility, staff recommends that we completely overhaul our waste management fee structure.
Okay. So that's to be determined.
That is correct.
Okay. All right. I think I'm good for the moment. There's a lot of active parts to this.
Yeah. On the organic grant process, do they give you an update, say what step we're at and how we're doing? Everything's still looking good for that, or there?
Yeah, so I'm a little less unfamiliar. I think Evan from Edgar and Associates is on the line. If you wanted to chime in, he could talk about the process. But we're planning on applying for the grant either tomorrow or early next week.
Okay.
That's the deadline, so we will apply for that, and then we will know if we are awarded funds sometime in October of this year.
Any more questions?
Well, first of all, yes to this illegal dumping and cleanup fund. I think that's important to keep in. Who does, I mean, is that something we do with like pack out, or is that something that HWA does independently, or?
So there's a couple different ways people can utilize, it's what we call the 901 fund, but it's the illegal disposal and cleanup funds. Generally, in the past, it has been utilized solely for illegally disposed material on member agencies' public property.
Okay.
We have in the past partnered with Pack Out Green Team for certain river bottoms in Ferndale. We've done before. I believe we partnered with a grant team for Rio Del Monument Road cleanup. The county and the city of Eureka utilize it frequently. So it is utilized tremendously, and I would like to better refine and maybe expand the potential uses for those funds.
Absolutely, and yes to whomever you hire to do your social media, to get that out to the public more, that's something that HWMA provides. I think that's fantastic. Let's see. What else? So for like salary surveys, is that something that you think that when you hire a new finance director, that might be something that we can put in their purview, or you still want to go outside the agency to?
I think in general, there's an inherent conflict with an individual giving recommendations for changing salaries when it directly or could directly affect them, which is also the director of finance that we hire most likely will not be someone who comes from that type of profession.
Sure.
The salary survey we got from Coffin Associates was an incredibly extensive document that took a lot of work and effort. They utilized their contacts from across the state with other public entities. That's unlikely to be something that a potential director of finance has.
Yeah, I'm just asking because
So while I think the director level and supervisor level could assess the document that is provided, I do believe the best course of action is to begin scheduling routine or set salary survey work.
Sure, and that being said, do you think that we've funded, have we budgeted enough for the new salary schedule that you just put?
So the budget as presented with the net income of $5.25 for the year includes a 6.5% COLA to all staff, yeah.
So we just went through this at my last city council meeting extensively. You guys are PERS, right?
That is correct.
We just went into like a whole unfunded liability rabbit hole at the last meeting. Is this something that?
So all costs associated with the 6.5% COLA are included in the budget as provided.
All right.
A couple of questions. This is maybe random, but so by backhaul, that's basically, they take waste out, and then if they don't bring anything back, there's less backhaul, right? That's, like when they come back.
That is correct.
I'm curious if there's been, I know we're expecting new industries coming into the area with the harbor. Have there been any conversations around potentially partnering with some of those incoming industries to alleviate the backhaul issue?
So the authority does not participate in the negotiation of backhauls like that. We do not have the expertise to begin to negotiate those types of things, whether that be driver hours, routes, truck infrastructure, drivers, things of that nature. What I can say is that we partner through contract with Dry Creek Landfill, and they subcontract through Bettendorf, which is a local company that has been doing this activity for well over 30 years at this point. The authority has been incredibly fortunate to receive the level of backhauls we have in the past. But without new infrastructure that requires material to come into the county, the projection is that the backhaul levels will stay right around 15 to 30%. What I will say is Bettendorf Trucking and Dry Creek Landfill have extensive conversations with contacts throughout our region. So a backhaul doesn't just have to be to Humboldt County. It can be driving by Humboldt County. It can be Mendocino. It can be farther south. It could even be Trinity, Del Norte, things of that nature where we would maybe pay an offset cost or finish out the haul. So those activities are ongoing, and when I met with Bettendorf staff and Dry Creek staff, they said that they will continue to contact everyone that they normally work with, even accounts that they no longer serviced or have not serviced in a very long time. They will reach out to see what type of backhauls they can drum up.
I'm just wondering if it might, I'm assuming they are way ahead of the game that I am in imagining where they are, but I'm just wondering if it might be useful to kind of check in with the Harbor Commission, the Harbor District, just to see if there's maybe a conversation that could be had.
So additionally, to put it into perspective, the authority on average sends 10 trailers that are 23 and a half tons to Dry Creek landfill 364 days a year. That is an enormous amount of material, and that means that those trucks have to find equal to or a little bit less than that material coming back. Obviously, those trailers can come back a little bit less laden than 23 and a half tons, but material generally, you don't ship half full trailers. Currently, we just don't have something in county that requires the sheer consistent level of material anymore that the soil industry and the pulp mills once had.
And then about yes, and I'll save most comments, so we'll let the public speak to. But for sure, the 901 fund would love to see that be possibly even more robust. But I'm just curious, when you mention the future and a future, return of the Eureka Recycling Center, if it would make sense to start putting away some portion of funds now for that, so that, maybe just a small percentage now, but that way just to start to develop a seed for that as a possibility in the future, so that we're not looking at it all one big lump or anything.
So it obviously, I'll take any direction that you give. I would also recommend budgeting for things that may not happen, or the cost may change, can be problematic. Obviously, the impact will be directly onto the tip fee as well. But we could talk about a funding level that you would like to see set aside for that. That's obviously something we could do.
And then just, can we get a sense of, I know every time someone goes, to the transfer station, it's a slightly different way, but can we get a sense of what the average rate increase for one person on one day might be?
So generally, most people fall under the minimum. Commercial entities, and obviously franchise haulers are the ones that are more impacted by large swings in the tip fee. I would say on average, probably $3 to $5 change for one trip.
Thanks. Any other questions?
Is that $3 for the individual?
That is correct.
That's not the commercial.
No, that is not the commercial. So say if you came down in your pickup truck tomorrow and dropped off waste, and if you approved and adopted the budget as presented tonight, and you came July 2nd, you would probably see an impact between $3 to $5 on your normal weight tag.
Because most people are going under
Most people are going under the minimum limit. Yeah. The minimums are 120 pounds, by the way. So generally, household individuals don't have that material. Now, individuals that come from areas that don't have mandatory collection or offer collection, that may impact them a little bit differently. But in general, most of our customers are residential customers, and Southall are under the minimums.
Okay, the other guys are gonna fill their truck. They come in and do that, fill their truck up, and they bring in
Yeah.
the whole field. Something else I had, but it went out of my mind while I was doing the other thing. I'll just defer at that point. Oh.
Okay, well, thanks to members of the public here in person and on Zoom for hearing it through all our questions. Does anyone in the public wish to make comment at this time? All right, we'll start with in person and then go to.
Oh, I don't even need to get up because it's the entire room's, but I'll stand just out of formality. Linda Wise, I'm going to speak both as a resident and somebody who knows about this stuff and also as general manager of Recology Humboldt County. First of all, I just want to say that I've looked over the budget for what that's being proposed today, and just quickly in looking at key performance indicators with what, the proportions of where, you should be with disposal and labor costs. It is right in line with exactly what we see. It's about 23% labor costs in your tip fees, as about 42% is being paid for by transportation right now. So it is in line, and I think it's a very well thought out document, and I like that that you're laying it out the way that it is, because I think we're bringing more transparency to garbage and the cost of garbage as we go into 1383, and I think that it's just beautiful the way that the budget's been laid out. With a comment with transportation and being able to find backhauls, what I would encourage you to do, and maybe some of your other areas of public life, is to really think about trucking and making comments around that, because we are really going to be seeing a bubble in trucking and transportation, not just with garbage, but with all products coming into the county here very soon. One of the challenges that we have and other people who are moving materials in and out of this county is being able to find backhauls. And that makes our products very expensive here. And no two trucks are the same. Like we utilize like possum bellies and trailers, may not be appropriate for other materials that are coming in and out of this county. So there's been a need to work with chambers and maybe with other trucking industries and maybe economic development to be able to find a database that is easily utilized as our economy changes, to be able to find appropriate backhauls so that we can all benefit, not just garbage, but for other economic sectors in the community to be able to benefit through transportation. So I encourage you to have that. And I will say, I'll prepare you pretty soon. There's some big changes that are happening again in the CARB laws. They're going to make changes in requirements in trucking here very soon that's going to impact us all. I don't know how that's going to be for us here in Humboldt County, but it's essentially, we're like living in Hawaii. It's just very expensive for us to live here just because of the transportation. The other thing I want to say is, that I think it's really important, just as an individual, one of the things I want to point out is the other day we did a compost giveaway for the community that was with organic, from organics that came from one of our facilities down in the Bay Area. And it was donated material and donated through transportation to bring it here. And the cost of that for the 60 cubic yards that we brought up here was about $3,500, which is about $58 a cubic yard. And none of us would ever pay $58 a cubic yard to bring compost in here. So it's very expensive, but I thought it was worth giving people the experience of having organic compost and having realized how important to have local organics processing here so that we could reduce the cost by not having to add transportation to that. And when we're breaking it down, it is really important that we keep in mind that, with food waste that's out there in the community, it's estimated that there's about it's like every person wastes about a pound of food a day, which is about 1,200 calories a day that's not going into the tummies of other people who need it. And it translates into dollar amounts. There's a waste of about $120 a month, for average families with paying for extra food that they don't eat. And we compare that to garbage, and if, we're going to be stingy with the garbage, we need to start having really good conversations about waste. And I think that's an area that this county really needs to start improving our communication with the community about, being mindful for things, because waste access and being able to access to food that's affordable is really important. So that's all I'm going to say. So that's me on my soapbox. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Frank Nelson, but just as a general person that lives in Humboldt County, I want to say that looking over the budget, I think that the results of your performance when you're overseeing a JPA, right? Sometimes they're not seen for 5 years. Everyone says that you're living the reality of the last president, right? So, I've heard that my whole life. Those are rules and regulations that have changed. But as you notice that HWMA has decided to really do an extensive capital improvement plan. And the further in the future you're able to anticipate big capital expenditures that we're going to need here around waste infrastructure, the lesser the impact you're going to be, right? The impacts, if the state of California is able to change laws on an annual basis and create a law like SB 1383, which fundamentally changes the face of the waste industry, and you can't anticipate what law is going to come out next year, right? The more you're able to control your future capital investments, the more you're able to anticipate them, and the more you're able to plan for larger and more reasonable reserves, the better off and the more level your tip fee is going to be on your citizens. That transfers to your contract haulers. It transfers over to your residuals and garbage that come through in recycle, and potentially one day residuals that are going to come through in organics. So I think that the capital improvement plan, and for us as people in Humboldt, I think that it's really important to focus on that, put a lot of emphasis on that, and to make sure that it's something that we're trying to anticipate is ready for kids and their kids, and that the plans that we have and the funds that we have for HWMA are effective enough to be able to anticipate what law is going to come next, what facility we're going to need to buy that's going to be in a property fluctuation, in a bubble, It's a lot of things, and I think it's really good to see it broke out like that. It's an intelligent plan, so thank you.
Okay, anyone on Zoom wish to make comment? Not sure if I can see hands or if no one has their hand up.
I don't believe anybody has their hand up.
Okay.
Chair.
I apologize, Frank, can I get your last name?
Nelson, N-E-L-S-O-N.
Okay, did everyone on Zoom hear me that if you want to make public comment, raise your hand right now? Okay, just wanted to check. Okay, we'll close public comment and bring it back to board here. Does anyone wish to make, and would you mind putting up the 3 things you wanted direction on again, or the 3 things I would love to see them again? But while you're we can take our time while you're doing that. Does anyone have anything to add? I'll direct Heather line that up. Well, I'll go ahead then. One of the things that I was thinking, and in light of Frank's public comment and just thinking ahead about potential future recycling center, is something. And I appreciate that we are putting funds into a capital improvement plan. And I think many of us who are serving on councils are kind of seeing the results of people not thinking ahead with things like our sewer infrastructure and things like that, where all of a sudden we have to, implement these really large rate increases. And so in my mind, I'm wanting to be a little bit more conservative in putting funds away. And I don't have like a percentage, but I'm kind of imagining like if there was, about 50 cents more per visit of someone put away towards future capital improvement plans, like what would that look like? So that's kind of an amount I'm thinking, just in terms of, putting that away. Oh, thanks. I'll look at that too.
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely. You're talking about adding to the tip, like an extra 50 cents per tip. Should go to $1 then.
So, the main place that I would place something like that, it would be one of two ways. We could either place it into the HMFA base fee, so it is better. It better shows exactly what that allocation is for, or it could be placed into the reserve funding portion of the facility fees. Both impact the tip fee directly. Both are allocated over the same tonnage, the 75,000 tons of member agency waste, less the 80,000 tons, less the 5% or the 5,000 tons out of county. So that could be placed in the HMA base fee, just to give the board an idea of costs. Proposed increase to the illegal dumping and cleanup funds is 68 cents a ton. That equals $54,400. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of how much that would impact the tip fee for that type of level of reserve saving.
So you're saying adding an extra $1 to the base tip, what was it?
We could either add it to the HMA base fee or the reserve funding portion of the facility fee.
Adding an extra $1 to the HMA base fee and then putting that back into the capital improvement.
I think so, yeah.
I like that.
And does that still include fully funding or even adding funding for the illegal disposal and cleanup fund, or could that be? Because you, in the recommended increase for 54,000, and that's the 68 cents per.
That is correct.
Sorry, I know you said this, that's already included in this budget?
That is correct.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Yeah, the two additions you see on the board right now and on the slides for the illegal disposal cleanup fund and the edible food recovery, the proposed fee, those are present in the budget as presented.
Okay. Now, I don't know, you want recommendations about how to go about the cost of living methodology. I mean, I don't have any expertise in that. I mean, is that something that we can tack on to whomever does the salary survey next? Is that something that?
I mean, that is an option. I would recommend the first option will be when I meet with the executive advisory committee to ask our member agencies at that level how they go about it.
Yeah.
And then report back to the board with some information from them.
Sounds reasonable. Sure.
But obviously that's something that we could include in an RFP for services for salary survey work.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, in order to have a salary adjustment, a cost of living type, whether it's CPI or some other measure, go into effect July 1, I think the timing is such that you would need to build it into your budget now. And you could, for example, take a conservative number, and then whatever the timing is on the salary survey, get feedback, and then you could maybe mid-year, if the budget allows, incorporate a second.
Yeah, General Counsel Diamond's correct. Staff would recommend proceeding with the 6.5% increase for all employees this year, and then rolling in a new methodology if one comes about in the upcoming fiscal years.
All right, yeah, I'm good with that. I think that's a good idea.
What do y'all think about these things?
Pardon me?
What do y'all think about the fact that these increases have been already put into the budget that we're looking at? Are you supportive of that?
I'm supportive. I am, yeah. I don't know that I want to add any additional fees at this, on top of that.
Yeah.
That's not what you were, I understood that's kind of what you were asking when you were trying to.
Yeah, so these would be included in the additions, and I think then, so it's great that I think we have consensus on supporting what you brought forward. But yeah, and I think then there's a question of a small additional fee to further invest in future infrastructure needs such as a recycling center or something
For this
like that.
year's budget?
That's what, it sounds like Director Matthews and I would support that, but I think we're wondering if there's more than us who would be supportive of that.
Well, would that go back to the commercial haulers too as well?
That would impact everyone except out of county haulers because it would not be included in the countywide program fees.
It would be the 75,000 tons
That is correct.
versus the,
It would not be allocated over 80,000 because the countywide fees are charged to all solid waste generated within member agencies. That means that if a company does a construction project and self-hauls it out of the area, they still are responsible for paying the countywide program fees. They are not responsible for paying the HWA base fees or the facility fees. They didn't avail themselves of either our service or services at our satellite facility locations. So the HWMA base fee or the reserve portion of the facility fees would impact the 75,000 tons that we receive.
but that would increase the budget by whatever, you had a number, 54,000 or something.
$1, so the Cummingsburg landfill pledge of revenue is 96 cents. I'm not sure why I didn't think of this earlier, but $1 to the HWMA base fee would be $75,000 because it's over 75,000 tons. I'm not sure why it took this long to realize that. But yeah.
'Cause I thought you asked for something about for each person that came to the HWMA. That was your original.
Yeah, but I think that this is,
I'm not attached to that. I mean, I like the idea of $75,000, an extra $75,000 a year to put.
into capital, into,
But it's nice. I mean, how do you take that, are the franchisees that directly affect the commercial haulers that haul to us, or does that,
Yes.
does it all get funneled back to the agent, to the local agency through their franchise agreements with each local entity?
That would be a more difficult answer that I could not provide. I am not fluent in any of your franchise fees, your franchise contracts. I don't know how expenses are allocated to member agencies. I can't answer that question, but the fee will be charged to residents, businesses, and franchise haulers.
So you would have to add to whatever the number, whatever it was.
Yep.
So much per ton to entity X, whoever was following it, you would add an additional $1 per
So
ton.
if you wanted to add $75,000 and you wanted a $1 line item to the HWMA base fee, the self-haul rate would be $187.17 instead of $186.17. The franchise rate would be $170.41 instead of $169.41. So those two fees will be impacted. Yes.
That's all based on tonnage.
That is correct. Yep.
I'm not opposed to it. I just, if that looks like it's practical to pull that off. You can ask for anything you want, but I mean, are you gonna get pushback over that? Beyond what you're already raising their fees.
I believe we have Recology in attendance if they'd like to respond to that. I can't personally respond to what franchise haulers will respond with, but I can take the direction of the board and implement it as best I can.
Wouldn't we want to ask Recology? I mean, I'm not the chair, but I'm just saying, wouldn't we want to ask? Wouldn't we want to do that since they're the main entity we're dealing with?
So just for clarification, Recology and Humboldt Sanitation, both franchise haulers were well aware of these costs before this meeting. We do have conversations regularly. I make sure that I keep them abreast of especially potential large increases to their fees. But at the end of the day, as Ms. Wise alluded to, costs have continued to go up and unfortunately will probably continue to go up in our area. So it is not a out of left field option.
You want me to answer?
Yeah, sure, if you.
Yeah, all of you, a component of your rates involves disposal. And every year we come to you prior to, that something is going to come into effect based on today's, the budget that's presented today. That's going to be a component of the rate package that we're going to be coming to you with prior to June. So disposal and the cost of disposal is going to be a component of what the rates are. I'll tell you, cost of living, for just for fuel alone has been close to 49% in the last year. And it's only, we do things kind of like in a weighted average on the other costs. So, disposal is currently, it's going to be about 40%, maybe roughly about 30 to 40% of what your current bill is. If you wanted to think about what you're currently paying at the curbside, that's going to mean like about a $5 increase. And you guys are going to be the ones that are going to be at the city councils and your staff's going to be presenting our rate package based on that. But I tell you, it's not out of line because their costs have gone, skyrocketed. So that's about all I got. I was just going to say when in talking with Eric about that, I wasn't surprised, costs are going up. I can't tell you exactly how much because I haven't done that equation yet.
Good with it.
I still feel.
Okay. And sorry, can I just get clarification? Is the board recommending a increase of $1 per ton, or is the board recommending an increase that would equate to $1 per visit for the average residential customer?
Not
I
that.
think we decided $1 per ton.
We're not.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm comfortable recommending that.
Yeah.
That's designated to a reserve fund, isn't it?
Staff would recommend not including that in the capital improvement plan.
Okay.
Staff would recommend making a new reserve.
Great.
Simply because of the sheer amount of work of overhauling the capital improvement plan this year. And I'd like it to track with its reserve and actual funding levels.
Okay.
So staff will bring something back in May that has a new potential reserve name. And we can go from there.
But it's something like a general fund so that it can be used, it's not designated to one particular item.
Yeah, I will ensure it's designated to the heart of what your guys' recommendation is tonight. And then obviously we can make adjustments at that May meeting to solidify that reserve fund.
And then you also bring this to the executive committee too.
Correct.
Anything else for the good of the order? Okay, well, with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Eric.
Yeah.
Bye, you guys.
Bye, thank you.
Sure.